Humans were extinct for 1,000 years. Then they came back as apex predators. The great hall of the Hegemony command station thrummed with the low harmonics of celebration. Overlord Vexthal stood at the center of the crystalline amphitheater, his cybernetic implants gleaming under the harsh artificial suns that powered the massive space station. Around him, representatives from 100 subjugated worlds raised their tribute cups in choreographed unity. 1,000 years, Vexthal's voice boomed through the neural amplifiers embedded in his throat, reaching every corner of the hall and broadcasting across the galaxy. 1,000 years since the last human plague was cleansed from our galaxy. 1,000 years of peace, order, and prosperity under Hegemony rule. The assembled aliens responded with the ritual phrase, their voices creating a discordant symphony of clicks, whistles, and guttural sounds. Glory to the Hegemony. Glory to eternal peace. In the shadows of the upper galleries, Ambassador Crixtal of the Valerian Diplomatic Corps kept his expression carefully neutral. His elongated fingers traced the hidden data pad beneath his ceremonial robes, where he maintained the forbidden archives, human literature, scientific papers, cultural records that the Hegemony had ordered destroyed centuries ago. While others celebrated the extinction of humanity, Crixtal remembered their final transmission. We do not go gently into that good night. The Overlord's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the holographic display showing the galaxy's current state. Green zones indicated full compliance, yellow showed manageable resistance, and red marked areas requiring pacification. For the first time in 3 centuries, the entire map glowed green. The human capacity for chaos, for disruption, for their childish concept of freedom, all of it has been purged, Vexthal continued. Their worlds have been redistributed, their technologies integrated into our superior systems, their very memory fading into the cosmic background radiation of history. Crixtal's inner eyelids flickered, a Valerian expression of deep skepticism. He had studied human history more thoroughly than any living being, and one thing he had learned was that humans were never more dangerous than when they appeared to be defeated. Their final battle had been too quick, too decisive, too convenient. As the celebration continued, automated monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge began registering unusual energy signatures. The readings were subtle, easily dismissed as natural phenomena, stellar drift, quantum fluctuations, the normal background noise of space. But deep in the computer cores of the Hegemony's most advanced sensors, pattern recognition algorithms began highlighting anomalies. Something was moving in the dark between the stars. 3 days after the Millennium celebration, mining station Kepler-7 detected its first anomaly. The station clung to the edge of a depleted asteroid field, its skeletal framework housing the last profitable extraction operations in the sector. Chief Engineer Zalthek, a 4-armed consortium member, noticed the readings during his routine systems check. Gravitational fluctuations in Grid 77 Alpha, he reported to Station Commander Yildar. Appears to be a ship, but the signature is unusual. Commander Yildar's scales shifted to a pale yellow, the Saurian equivalent of a frown. Unusual how? The mass readings suggest a vessel approximately 200 meters in length, but the energy signature is almost invisible. It's as if the ship is absorbing background radiation rather than emitting it. Before Yildar could respond, the proximity alarms began their haunting wail. On the main display, a sleek vessel materialized from what had appeared to be empty space. Its hull was a dark, organic-looking material that seemed to bend light around it, and its design was unlike anything in the Hegemony databases. "Hail them," Yildar ordered, his claws unconsciously extending in a threat display. The response came immediately, in perfect galactic standard. "Mining Station Kepler-7, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran reconnaissance vessel Lazarus, requesting permission to dock." The control room fell silent. Zalthek's four arms froze over his controls. Even the station's atmospheric processors seemed to pause in their rhythmic cycling. "Impossible," Yildar whispered. "Terran, there are no Terrans, they're extinct." "Captain Chen," Yildar finally managed, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "You claim to be human. That's impossible. Humans were eliminated 1,000 years ago." A pause, then. "Were we? How interesting. We seem to have missed that memo." The docking bay doors opened without authorization. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red as the strange vessel settled onto the deck with barely a whisper of displaced air. Its hull continued to ripple with that light bending effect, making it difficult to look at directly. The airlock cycled, and Sarah Chen stepped onto the station. She was recognizably human in basic anatomy, but wrong in fundamental ways. Her skin had a subtle metallic sheen, and her eyes held flecks of silver that seemed to shift and dance. When she moved, it was with a fluid grace that suggested bones and muscles working in perfect harmony. Most disturbing of all, the station's electronic systems began to flicker and hum in her presence. "Captain Chen," Yildar said, his voice carefully formal. "I am Commander Yildar. I must inform you that according to all official records, your species was declared extinct following the Hegemony's final pacification campaign." Sarah's smile was perfectly human and perfectly terrifying. "Extinct? No, Commander, we were sleeping, and now we're awake." She raised her hand, and every electronic system in the docking bay responded. Lights brightened, atmospheric processors hummed louder, and the station's defensive systems powered down without anyone touching a control. "I'm afraid I'll need to use your communication array," she said conversationally. "I have some calls to make." In the depths of the Hegemony Intelligence Division, Senior Analyst Corfton reviewed the report from Mining Station Kepler 7 with growing alarm. The initial contact had been followed by a complete communications blackout, not destruction, but a systematic shutdown of all transmissions. The station was still there, still functioning, but it might as well have been on the other side of the galaxy. "Sir," his aide approached nervously, "we have similar reports from 12 other stations along the rim. Contact, shutdown, silence." Corfton's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Deploy the 7th Fleet to investigate, and get me a direct line to Overlord Vexthal." Meanwhile, aboard the Lazarus, Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the ship's bridge but now resembled something between a neural interface and a living organism. Cables of biometallic fiber connected her directly to the ship systems, allowing her to process information at speeds that would have been impossible for baseline humans. "Status report," she said, her voice carrying through the ship's neural network to her crew. "Awakening protocol is proceeding on schedule," replied Dr. Marcus Webb, his appearance more traditionally human than Sarah's, but his eyes holding the same silver flecks. "We've established contact with 17 sleeper facilities across the outer rim. The first 1,000 are already emerging from stasis." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of a millennium of preparation. The Great Sleep had not been a retreat or a hiding. It had been the most ambitious transformation in human history. Using experimental biotechnology developed in the final years before their supposed extinction, humanity had chosen evolution over death. "Any sign of the Hegemony response?" "Long-range sensors detect fleet movements from 3 sectors," Dr. Webb reported. "They're treating us as a military threat." "Good," Sarah's smile was sharp. "They should." The ship's communication array, a hybrid of human innovation and evolved biotechnology, crackled to life. Across the galaxy, in hidden facilities that had remained dormant for 1,000 years, the awakening protocol spread like wildfire through quantum-encrypted networks. On the mining station, Commander Yildar watched in fascination and terror as Sarah interfaced directly with their communication systems. She didn't use controls or interfaces. She simply placed her hand on the nearest data port and the entire station's network bent to her will. "You're broadcasting to dead space," he observed. "Am I?" Sarah's consciousness expanded through the station's sensors, reaching out across the void. "Look again." The long-range scanners, previously showing empty space, began detecting energy signatures. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Ships that had been invisible moments before materialized on the displays, their dark hulls reflecting the same light-bending properties as the Lazarus. "My God," Zalthik whispered, his forearms trembling. "How many of you are there?" "Enough," Sarah replied. "We spent 1,000 years preparing for this moment. Every human who entered the Great Sleep was transformed, enhanced, evolved. We are what we needed to become to reclaim our galaxy." The first Hegemony response fleet dropped out of hyperspace, just as the human ships began their coordinated advance. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of just how thoroughly humanity had evolved to counter their former oppressors. Ambassador Crystal stood before the hidden data vault in his private chambers, his elongated fingers dancing across the biometric locks. For 9 centuries, he had maintained this secret archive, preserving human culture, technology, and history, while the Hegemony systematically erased all traces of Earth's children from the galaxy. The emergency broadcast from the outer rim had reached him through carefully maintained back channels. The humans had returned, and they were nothing like the historical records suggested they should be. "Ambassador," his aide's voice crackled through the comm system, "the Hegemony Council has called an emergency session. Your presence is required immediately." Crystal's internal chronometer showed he had perhaps an hour before his absence would be noticed. He activated the vault's final protocol, a signal beacon that would broadcast on frequencies only humans would recognize, using mathematical constants from their own historical transmissions. The response was immediate. A voice, clearly human but with harmonic overtones that suggested technological enhancement, spoke directly through his private communication array. "This is Captain Sarah Chen. Am I speaking to the Keeper of Records?" Crystal's throat sacs inflated with surprise. "You know about the records?" "We know about everything, Ambassador. Your people's sacrifice, your preservation of our culture, your faith that we would return. We've been monitoring your transmissions for the past 50 years, preparing for this moment." 50 years, Crystal's voice rose in pitch, but the monitoring stations would have detected any human presence. "Would they? We've changed, Ambassador. We've become what we needed to become. May I come aboard your station?" 20 minutes later, Crystal stood in his private docking bay, watching as space itself seemed to tear open and disgorge a human figure. Sarah Chen materialized from what could only be described as a personal stealth field, her form solidifying as she stepped onto the deck. "Ambassador Crystal," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with his communication organs. "We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." "The debt is mine," Crystal replied, his formal training taking over. "I preserved what I could, but so much was lost." "Nothing was lost," Sarah interrupted gently. "We carry our entire history within us now. Every human who underwent the Great Sleep shares a collective memory of our species. Your records helped us verify that memory, ensure we remain true to what we were while becoming what we needed to be." She approached the data vault, and Crystal watched in amazement as her hand passed through the biometric locks, as if they were suggestions rather than barriers. The vault opened, revealing terabytes of human cultural data. "Shakespeare," she said, her voice soft with emotion. "Beethoven, the Gettysburg Address, the first moon landing, all of it preserved." "You remember these things." "We remember everything. But more than that, we understand them in ways our ancestors never could. The Great Sleep wasn't just about physical evolution. We enhanced our cognitive abilities, our emotional processing, our capacity for beauty and art and love. We became more human, not less. The station's alarms began to sound. Through the viewport, Crystal could see Hegemony patrol ships approaching. "They're coming for you," he said. Sarah's smile was radiant. "Let them come. It's time the galaxy learned what humanity has become." Overlord Vexthal stood in the command center of the Hegemony's most advanced dreadnought, the Subjugator, watching the tactical displays with growing disbelief. 17 fleet actions across the Outer Rim had resulted in 17 defeats, not battles lost through superior firepower or tactical genius, defeats through complete technological superiority. "Explain to me again how an extinct species is systematically dismantling our fleets," he said, his cybernetic voice modulators adding an edge of menace to every word. Fleet Admiral Kithvar's carapace shifted to a deep purple, the arthropod equivalent of extreme stress. "Sir, the enemy vessels appear to be interfacing directly with our technology. They're not defeating our systems, they're converting them." "Converting them to what?" To serve them, sir. At the Battle of Kepler Station, we watched our own weapons turn on us. The enemy didn't fire a single shot. They simply convinced our ships to surrender. Vexthal's cybernetic eye whirred as it processed this information. His enhanced neural implants, designed to interface with Hegemony technology, began running threat assessments. The results were uniformly catastrophic. "These humans," he said slowly, "they're not the same species we eliminated." "No, sir. Intelligence suggests they've undergone some form of enhancement, possibly technological, possibly biological. Our experts believe." "I don't care what our experts believe," Vexthal snarled. "I care about results. Deploy the Omega Fleet. Full cybernetic warfare protocols. If they can interface with our technology, then we'll use technology they can't interface with." What Vexthal didn't understand, what he couldn't understand, was that humanity had spent 1,000 years specifically preparing for this moment. Every Hegemony technology, every cybernetic enhancement, every control system had been studied, analyzed, and countered during the Great Sleep. The Omega Fleet, the Hegemony's most advanced cybernetic warfare vessels, dropped out of hyperspace directly into humanity's trap. The lead vessel, the Dominator, found itself facing a single human ship, sleek, organic, and seemingly defenseless. "Surrender immediately," came the standard Hegemony demand. "You are outgunned and outnumbered. Resistance is futile." The response came not through communication channels, but directly through the Dominator's own systems. Sarah Chen's voice emerged from every speaker, every display, every cybernetic implant on the ship. "Hello, Overlord Vexthal, we need to talk." Vexthal's cybernetic enhancements went haywire. Warning lights flashed across his vision as his implants began receiving data streams he couldn't control. Through his enhanced senses, he could feel the human presence spreading through his ship like a virus, if viruses could think and plan and remember. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our cybernetics are isolated, encrypted." "Are they?" Sarah's voice was everywhere now, coming from the ship's walls, the air recyclers, the gravity generators. "We've had 1,000 years to study your technology, Overlord. Every system you've built, we've learned to exceed. Every enhancement you've made to yourselves, we've made better." The Dominator's weapon systems powered down. Its engines fell silent. One by one, the ships of the Omega Fleet went dark, their crews trapped inside vessels that no longer obeyed their commands. "What do you want?" Vexthal demanded. "What we've always wanted," Sarah replied. "Freedom, for ourselves and for every species you've enslaved. The age of the Hegemony is ending, Overlord. The question is whether it ends with surrender or with consequences." Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the observation deck of the Lazarus, watching as the galaxy's most carefully guarded secret finally revealed itself. Across 1,000 star systems, hidden facilities that had remained dormant for a millennium were coming online. The Great Sleep was ending, and humanity was awakening to reclaim its birthright. Status report. Sarah's voice came through the neural link they all shared, a product of their evolutionary enhancement. Awakening protocol is at 67% completion, Webb replied, his consciousness interfacing directly with the ship's data systems. 3 million humans have successfully emerged from stasis. All report successful integration of the evolutionary modifications. Through the ship's sensors, Webb could see the scope of what they had accomplished. Sleeper ships that had been invisible for centuries were materializing throughout the galaxy. Each one carried thousands of evolved humans, their bodies and minds transformed by the most ambitious biotechnology project in history. The Hegemony response, Sarah asked. Massive fleet movements from 17 sectors. They're mobilizing everything they have. Webb paused, processing incoming data. Overlord Vexthal has declared a state of galactic emergency. He's activated the extinction protocol. Sarah's presence sharpened through the neural link. They're going to sterilize every world they think might harbor humans. Not just human worlds, Webb corrected grimly. The intelligence suggests they're targeting any planet that's shown signs of resistance over the past 1,000 years. They'd rather rule over Ash than lose control. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment when the hegemony would reveal its true nature. Not benevolent rulers maintaining galactic peace, but tyrants willing to commit genocide to maintain power. Signal the fleet, Sarah commanded. All units implement liberation protocol. No hegemony vessel reaches a populated world. No exceptions. Across the galaxy, the hidden human fleet moved with coordinated precision. Ships that had been invisible moments before materialized in the paths of hegemony armadas. The evolved humans didn't engage in traditional combat. They simply reached out with their enhanced abilities and convinced the enemy vessels to stop. On the bridge of the subjugator, Vexthal watched his fleet die without firing a shot. Ship after ship simply went dark, their crews trapped inside vessels that no longer recognized their authority. His cybernetic implants, designed to enhance his command capabilities, had become liabilities, direct channels for human consciousness to reach into his very thoughts. Sir, Admiral Kithvar reported, his voice shaking, we're receiving surrender signals from 60% of our fleet. They're saying the ships won't obey orders to fire on civilian targets. Vexthal's cybernetic eye focused on the tactical display. The humans weren't just defeating his fleets, they were liberating them, converting his own vessels into instruments of freedom rather than oppression. Impossible, he whispered. We built these systems, we control them. Do you? Sarah Chen's voice emerged from his own cybernetic implants. You've spent 1,000 years building a galaxy-spanning control network, but you made one crucial error. You built it all using technology we helped you develop. Every circuit, every protocol, every command structure. We know it all intimately. Vexthal's hands moved to his command console, but his cybernetic enhancements began displaying information he hadn't requested. Personnel files, fleet dispositions, the locations of every hegemony installation in the galaxy. His own technology was betraying him. What are you? He demanded. We're what you forced us to become, Sarah replied. 1,000 years ago, you defeated us through superior technology and coordination, so we spent 1,000 years becoming superior to your technology and coordination. We evolved specifically to counter everything you represent. The tactical display showed the truth of her words. Across the galaxy, hegemony forces were surrendering or simply shutting down. The evolved humans had turned the hegemony's own infrastructure against them, using their enhanced abilities to liberate rather than destroy. The age of the hegemony is over, Sarah continued. The question now is what comes next. Will you help us build something better, or will you cling to the old ways until they destroy you? Vexthal looked at his own reflection in the darkened console, more machine than organic, more tool than being. For the first time in centuries, he wondered if the humans might be right. The final phase of humanity's return began at dawn on 1,000 worlds simultaneously. As the Hegemony's control networks collapsed, the evolved humans emerged from their hidden facilities and began the delicate work of liberation. Sarah Chen stood in the central plaza of New Hegemony, the administrative capital of the galaxy, watching as the towering control spires went dark one by one. Around her, confused alien civilians emerged from their habitation blocks, many of them seeing the sky without the electromagnetic haze of control fields for the first time in their lives. "Citizens of the galaxy," she broadcast through every communication system on the planet, her voice carrying the harmonic resonances that marked her as evolved human. "You are free." The response was immediate and chaotic. Some aliens cheered, others cowered, and many simply stood in stunned silence. The concept of freedom had become so alien to most of them that they couldn't process its meaning. Ambassador Crixtal materialized beside her, his diplomatic transport having arrived moments earlier. "The Valerian Council is prepared to recognize the new order," he reported, "as are 47 other species representatives. The rest are uncertain." Sarah nodded, her enhanced senses monitoring the planet's emotional state through electromagnetic fields and pheromone traces. Fear, confusion, hope, and anger swirled together in a complex symphony of liberation. "They've been slaves for 1,000 years, she said. "Freedom is a skill that must be relearned." Dr. Webb's voice came through the neural link. "Sarah, we have a problem. Vexthal is attempting to activate the Omega contingency." Sarah's consciousness expanded, reaching out through the planet's data networks to assess the threat. The Omega contingency was the Hegemony's final failsafe, a series of antimatter bombs hidden throughout the galaxy's most important worlds. If Vexthal couldn't rule the galaxy, he would destroy it. "How many devices?" she asked. 17,000, Webb replied grimly. "Enough to sterilize every major population center. He's trying to activate them from the subjugator." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 million evolved human minds joining with hers through the neural link. This was what they had become, not just individuals, but a collective consciousness capable of processing information and making decisions at the speed of thought. "All units converge on the subjugator," she commanded. "Priority Alpha, stop Vexthal at all costs." The human fleet moved with inhuman precision, their ships materializing around the massive Hegemony dreadnought in a complex three-dimensional formation. But Vexthal was desperate now, his cybernetic enhancements pushing his organic brain to its limits as he tried to activate the Omega devices. "You want to be free," his voice boomed across the galaxy's communication networks. "Then be free in death. I will not let you corrupt the order we have built." Sarah felt the activation sequences beginning across the galaxy. In 17,000 hidden locations, antimatter containment fields began their final countdown. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the galaxy burned. "Webb, can you interface with the Omega network?" "Not from here. The activation codes are hardwired into Vexthal's cybernetic implants. I would need direct access to his neural interface." Sarah smiled, her consciousness already reaching out through the subjugator's systems. "Then let's go collect him." The subjugator's corridors echoed with the sound of failing systems as Sarah materialized inside the ship's command center. Her evolved form allowed her to literally step through the electronic barriers that should have stopped her, her consciousness riding the data streams like a river of light. Vexthal stood at the center of the command deck, his cybernetic implants glowing with malevolent energy as he interfaced directly with the Omega network. Around him, His crew lay unconscious, their own cybernetic enhancements overloaded by the power required to maintain the doomsday sequence. 8 minutes, he said without turning around. 8 minutes until every major world in the galaxy becomes a radioactive tomb. Do you still think freedom is worth the price? Sarah approached slowly, her enhanced senses reading the electromagnetic chaos surrounding the Overlord. His cybernetic implants were burning out his organic brain, but he was maintaining the connection through sheer force of will. "You're dying," she observed. "We're all dying," Vexthal replied. "The only question is whether we die as slaves or as free beings." "You think the hegemony made you free?" Vexthal finally turned, and Sarah saw the truth of his condition. His cybernetic eye was bleeding coolant, and his neural implants were literally cooking his brain tissue. But his organic eye held something she hadn't expected, not madness, but a terrible clarity. "I think the hegemony made us safe," he said. "Order, structure, peace. Your kind brought nothing but chaos and war. We eliminated you for the good of the galaxy. And yet here we are." "Here you are," he agreed. "Changed, enhanced, no longer human in any meaningful sense. You've become exactly what we always said you were, a species that would rather transform itself beyond recognition than accept the natural order." Sarah felt the Omega countdown continuing. 6 minutes. All across the galaxy, antimatter containment fields were approaching critical instability. Soon, the choice would be made for everyone. "You're right," she said quietly. "We did choose transformation over submission. We chose to become something new rather than accept extinction. But we chose to become something better, not something worse." "Better?" Vexthal's laugh was bitter. "You're interfacing with technology through biological enhancement. You're sharing consciousness through neural links. You're not individuals anymore, you're a collective organism wearing human faces." "We're still human," Sarah replied. "We still value freedom, creativity, love, hope. We've just gained the ability to defend those values." "Prove it." Sarah extended her hand. "Interface with me, see what we've become, see what we're offering the galaxy." Vexthal stared at her outstretched hand. The Omega countdown showed 4 minutes remaining. All across the galaxy, billions of beings were continuing their lives, unaware that they were minutes away from annihilation. "If I interface with you, you'll be able to access the Omega codes," he said. "Yes." "You'll be able to stop the detonation." "Yes." "And you'll be able to see everything I am, everything the hegemony has done, every world we've pacified, every species we've enslaved, every individual we've broken in the name of order." Sarah nodded. "I'll see it all." Vexthal looked at his reflection in the command console's darkened surface. More machine than organic, more tool than being. He had become exactly what the hegemony needed him to be, a perfect instrument of control. "And afterward," he asked. "Afterward we build something better, together." 3 minutes. Vexthal's cybernetic implants were failing, his organic brain beginning to shut down from the strain. Soon, the choice would be made for him by simple biological limitation. He reached out and took Sarah's hand. The interface was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah felt Vexthal's consciousness merging with hers, and through him, she experienced 1,000 years of hegemony rule. The crushing weight of imposed order, the systematic elimination of dissent, the slow transformation of free beings into willing slaves. But she also felt something else, Vexthal's genuine belief that he was serving the greater good. His conviction that order was preferable to chaos, that peace was worth any price, that freedom was a luxury the galaxy couldn't afford. Through the neural link, she showed him humanity's vision. Not the chaos he expected, but a complex harmony of free beings working together because they chose to, not because they were forced to. The evolved humans had become something new, a species that could maintain individual identity while sharing collective wisdom. Fascinating, Vexthal whispered as the Omega codes flowed through their shared consciousness. You've created what we always claimed to be a perfect society, but you've done it through enhancement rather than control. We learned from our mistakes, Sarah replied, and from yours. The countdown stopped with 37 seconds remaining. Across the galaxy, the antimatter devices powered down, their threat neutralized. The Hegemony's final weapon had been defeated not through force, but through understanding. Vexthal collapsed, his cybernetic implants finally failing completely. But his organic eye remained clear, focused on Sarah with something approaching wonder. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we build," Sarah replied, "all of us together." 6 months after the end of the Hegemony, Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Station, watching as representatives from 300 species gathered for the first truly free Galactic Congress in over a millennium. The station itself was a marvel of hybrid technology, human biotechnology, merged with the best innovations from dozens of species. It grew rather than being built, its living corridors and chambers adapting to the needs of its inhabitants. The arthropod delegation is still concerned about the neural link technology, Ambassador Crixtal reported, his role as humanity's primary diplomatic contact making him one of the busiest beings in the galaxy. They fear it represents a form of mental domination. Sarah nodded, understanding the concern. The evolved human's ability to share consciousness was perhaps their most dramatic enhancement, and to species that had lived under hegemony mind control, it looked suspiciously familiar. "Arrange a demonstration," she said. "Let them experience the link directly. They'll understand the difference between sharing and domination." Through the station's living walls, she could sense the emotional state of the gathered delegates. Fear, hope, suspicion, and wonder created a complex symphony of feeling. 300 species, many of whom had never been allowed to interact freely, were learning to work together. Dr. Webb's voice came through the neural link. "Sarah, we have a request from the Hegemony survivors. They want to know if they can participate in the assembly." It was a delicate question. The Hegemony as a political entity had been dissolved, but millions of its citizens remained beings who had genuinely believed in the old order and were struggling to adapt to freedom. "What does Vexthal recommend?" she asked. The former overlord had survived his final interface with Sarah, though his extensive cybernetic enhancements had been permanently damaged. He now served as an advisor to the Assembly, helping to understand and dismantle the Hegemony's control systems. "He believes integration is possible," Webb replied, "but it will require extensive rehabilitation. Many former Hegemony citizens have never experienced true choice. They need to learn how to be free." Sarah felt the weight of the decision. The easy path would be to exclude the former oppressors, to create a new order based on the exclusion of the old. But that would simply recreate the cycle of domination and resistance that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. "Open the assembly to all beings," she decided. "Freedom means nothing if it's not extended to everyone, even those who once opposed it." The announcement caused a stir among the delegates. Some species, particularly those who had suffered most under hegemony rule, objected strongly. Others, recognizing the wisdom of inclusion, supported the decision. "We're taking a risk," Crixtal observed. "We're taking a chance," Sarah corrected. "There's a difference." As the assembly began its work, Sarah felt the pulse of the galaxy through the neural link. 3 million evolved humans, spread across 1,000 worlds, were working to build something that had never existed before, a truly free galactic civilization. They were no longer the species that had been defeated 1,000 years ago. They were no longer even entirely human in the traditional sense, but they were still driven by the same fundamental values that had defined humanity since the beginning. The belief that freedom was worth any price, that every being deserved the chance to choose their own destiny, and that the future was always worth fighting for. The Great Sleep was over. The Age of Freedom had begun. 1 year after the first galactic assembly, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Earth, humanity's ancient homeworld, now restored and transformed into a living monument to what they had become. The planet pulsed with biotechnology, its cities grown rather than built, its ecosystems enhanced rather than replaced. Children played in the parks, not just human children, but young beings from dozens of species who had chosen to make Earth their home. They laughed and learned together, their different biologies and cultures creating a harmony that would have been impossible under the old order. "Status report," she said into the neural link, though it was more habit than necessity. The evolved humans maintained constant awareness of each other's thoughts and experiences. "The Outer Rim colonies are fully established," Dr. Webb reported. "The Andromeda expedition is ready for launch, and the first generation of naturally born evolved humans has begun to show signs of further development." Sarah smiled. Evolution, it seemed, was not a destination but a journey. Each generation of humanity would build upon the achievements of the last, becoming something new while remaining true to their core values. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" she asked. "Nothing yet, but the galaxy is vast and we've only just begun to explore it." The neural link carried more than just information. It carried emotion, memory, hope. Through it, Sarah could feel the dreams of 3 million evolved humans, all working toward the same goal, a galaxy where every being could reach their full potential. The Great Sleep had ended, but the Great Dream was just beginning. In the depths of space, ancient monitoring stations detected new energy signatures, not the dark, light-bending ships of the evolved humans, but something else entirely. Something that had been watching the galaxy for eons, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The humans had evolved to meet the challenge of the hegemony, but the galaxy held older powers, stranger mysteries, and greater wonders than any species had yet imagined. Humanity's story was far from over. It was just beginning. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more journeys. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next adventure.